The Elf at the Woodlands, retold from Richard Hengist, horn by William Byron. Forbush. One morning when the summer sun was still sleeping, an elf came up from below, tickling an oak tree's foot, skipping like a flea, and whispering mischievously to himself. With little legs straddling, he dances about, pretends to be waddling, then leaps with a flout. Now he stops, now he hops, now cautiously trips on tiptoe and sliptoe. He scuttles and skips along the grass, gliding, half dancing, half sliding. There was a pretty white cottage on the edge of the wood, and, with everybody quiet within, it also seemed asleep. Toward this cottage skipped the elf. He was a little fellow, scarce 5 inches tall. His body was as brown as the bark of a tree, all mixed with green streaks and tarnished gold. You could hardly see him as he went stooping along against the green leaves and the brown branches. When he got to the sleeping cottage, he climbed up the lattice, and poked his sharp little nose into every crevice. He pulled open a loose shutter, tapped once or twice on the windows, and when he found a broken pane, in he went. In this cottage lived a girl named Tootie. She was not very big, as you can believe when I tell you that all the shrubs in the garden were taller than she, and all the flowers nodded over her head. In this same house lived Tootie's cousins, Kitty, and Crocus, and Twig, and Tiny. Only Tiny was a little dog, not a little boy. And here, too, lived Grandmother Grey, in spectacles, tucker and flowered chintz gown, who always half smiled when trying to frown. Grandmother Grey took care of them all. At 5 o'clock that morning she woke up. "What noise do I hear below?" she cried. "It is daylight, but nobody is up, I know." So Grandmother Grey threw off her skullcap and bandage, and nightcap with all its ribbons, bows and strings, and called out loudly, "Come, children, jump up quickly. There's a rat in the dairy. Come down with me." Then Tootie, and Crocus, and Kitty, and Twig, in their nightgowns and nightcaps, ran scrambling and laughing downstairs, with Tiny barking and tumbling about between their legs. They crept through the parlor, where all the shutters were closed but one. Like cautious Indians they went silently on, Dame Grey and the children in single file, each holding on to the one before by the tail of her nightgown. Into the dairy they went, and stared about. Then they huddled together in fear, for behind a milk jug, under the spout, they saw a quaint little figure. It was golden, and greenish, and earthy brown, with a poking nose and a pointed chin. It had very bright eyes and a funny frown, with a russet apple's network skin. They all started to run in terror, but brave Tiny sprang up and began to chase the elf around a milk pan. Oh, what a race was there! They ran so fast that the two small bodies were as one. They looked like the dark band on the humming top when you spin it, and just as Tiny was about to catch him, the elf leaped into a pan, swam across 3 pails of milk, climbed the wall and hid on a shelf. We've lost him, cried all the children. But, just in time, Grandmother Grey seized her jelly bag, swung it across the shelf, and into it was swept our little elfin friend. "Now, children," said she, "go up and dress." The children did not know what the old dame was going to do next. She led the way into the parlor. "Tiny," said she, "I depend on you to keep watch for us." So Tiny stood like a soldier, with both ears cocked and his nose down bent, and watched every motion that was going on in the bag, which stood up now like a tent on the floor. 'Twas but a minute before the children were down again, all dressed. The tea kettle was singing, and the hot rolls were on the table, and everybody was ringing the bell all at once for more eggs. But Tiny stood guard over the jelly bag tent. "I think the elf is hungry and thirsty," said Tootie. So she slipped a saucer of milk under the edge of the tent, and then, laughing, she rolled in an egg. They all listened for 10 minutes, and then they plainly heard the crackling of the shell. "Away with the tea things," said Dame Grey to Martha, the maid, "and bring me my white wicker bird cage." So the bird cage was brought, and Grandmother Grey took up the jelly bag carefully, clapped its mouth to the open cage door, shook it, and, pop in went the elf, and the cage door was made fast. Did he moan? Did he complain? Not he. With 1 spring and 10 kicks he climbed to the pole and seated himself there, with his hands on the pole. Tootie ran close to the cage, and so did Crocus and Twig, and Kitty, a little farther off, stood staring and smiling. But the elf was not a bit frightened. He sat swinging his little legs, with his tongue in his left cheek and his left eye looking down with a half-winking, impertinent air. "Now," cried Dame Grey, "tell us who you are, little sir, and what you are. Do you know that you have spoilt all my cream, and broken my best china cup? Speak up now, what have you to say for yourself?" The elf was very angry, but it would never do to show it, so he tried to look as gentle as a good child reading a book. He rubbed some of the yellow of the egg off his chin, and stuck it on his leg like a buttercup. He shrugged his shoulders up in a bunch, and then, with a sneeze as if he had caught cold in the forest, he began. 9 white witches sat in a circle close, with their backs against a greenwood tree, as around the dead nettle's summer stem its woolly white blossoms you see. Then from hedges and ditches, these old lady witches took birdweed and ragweed and speargrass for me, and they wove me a bower, against the snowstorm or shower, in a dry old hollow beech tree. Twangle tea, re-rigged 'em, dingle shade laugh, tingle dee nonsense said Grandmother Grey, you can't fool me with your nettles, and nonsense, and hedges, and ditches. What do I care about all that? You know as well as I do that you came here to steal cake and drink cream. Besides, you have broken my best china cup. The elf gave a sigh, and looked up in the air, then took a glance at Martha's broom, and as he looked down he thought he saw Tooty winking at him, so he just smiled and said, I declare, by the tomtit's folly, and the mole's pinhole eye, and the woodpecker's thorny tongue, that I have told you the truth. Noticing that Tooty was still winking at him, he kept on, and told the following story. One day when I was loafing about in the wood I heard a strange noise in the bushes. I peeped over the edge, and there was a robin bathing in the brook. It ruffled its feathers with a spattering sound, made itself into a fussy ball, and threw up a shower of water, but what I most noticed was its eye. Its eye, its eye, its eye broke in all the children. What about its eye? The elf glanced again at Tooty, and he saw that this time she gave him a quiet nod, as much as to say, I'll find you a chance. So the elf gave a downward squint at the closed cage door, just for a hint. Then he scratched his cheek, jumped down on the floor of the cage, and began to act out a robin, just as if he were on the stage. Its eye, well, just as soon as it caught a glimpse of me it bobbed, took wing, and was out of sight. Then back it came again, as if angry. It looked like an alderman lecturing the poor, but meaning really to unlock the cage. I mean, to try to fool me. See how high it flies, clear up to the tip-top of the tree. Look at its large bright eye, there, see how it bobs, makes a quick bow, just as I am doing, points down its tail and up its nose, and off it goes and out and off went the elf. Run, Tiny, run. Oh, Kitty, Twig, the little rascal is gone. Run, Tooty, run. Ah, I caught you, you are the one who loosened the cage door. Run, Tiny. Oh, Kitty, Twig, and Crocus. That Robin Redbreast story was only meant to fool us, thus cried Grandmother Grey, till she was breathless. Off they all ran trooping, and hallooing and whooping, beneath the low boughs stooping, right through the wood, for Grandmamma Grey, like an old duck, led the way, when a string of ducks trudged to a flood. Then came Kitty, side by side with Tooty, who oft cried, oh, Kitty dear, was ever such rare fun, and Crocus close to Twig, both scampered in a jig, for they knew the elf his freedom race had won. As for him, the roguish elf, he took good care of himself, his mites of legs they twinkled as he fled. He was scarcely seen, indeed, he so glistened with his speed, and his hair streamed out like silver grass behind his head. So Dame Grey and the children chased the elf till they were hot and tired, until the sun went down, and by they gave up, and all went home to let Martha wash their soiled hands and faces. It was a warm and pleasant night, and before very long all the children were fast asleep. Within a very little nook, Tooty always slept alone. Its strip of window stole a look over the lawn and hayrick cone. Within the open lattice crept some jasmine from the cottage wall, and to the breathing of her sleep, softly swayed, with rise and fall. But something else comes creeping in, as softly, from the starry night. The elf, 'tis he, first peeping in, now like a moth doth he alight. He trips up to the little bed, and near it hangs a full-blown rose. Then in the middle of the flower place is a light that gleams and glows. It is a glowworm from the lea, and lighting up the rose's heart, a fairy grot it seems to be, where dream thoughts live and ne'er depart. And now the elf once more is gone into the woodlands wild, leaving his blessing thus to shine upon the sleeping child.